got a very special guest today, myself and Mr. Gerrish. We're doing a pre-recorded show because we have the wonderful David Icke joining us. And, let's hand over. Good afternoon, David.
Hello, Lou. Hello, Brian.
Good afternoon to you. It's good to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's been a long time, isn't it, really? I've been watching interviews for a long time, and it's nice.
Okay. Well, we're very encouraged by the response that we're getting, and Louise has been doing a great job with her radio show, which has given us a little bit of a push into mainstream media on a local scale. But I've no doubt that it's made a real difference, and then we're getting a good result now to what we're pushing out via the UK column, and the idea has been to bring as many people as we can in and interview them, and slowly but surely, we're picking up viewers and listeners. So we're very encouraged by that.
Well, just when I said I watch the interviews, I watch them often when they're put onto YouTube. That's what I mean by watch. I know it's a radio thing, and I think it's very, very important. I think it's been a long time coming that we have a radio voice in this country that can talk about this information that the mainstream won't, because, of course, over in America, there's lots and lots of stations and programs that are putting this out. And it's nice that we've got this in Britain because, this in so many ways, this country is the epicenter of all of it. Not only because so much of the control system is covertly operating out of the City of London, as well as places like Rome, etc., but also because, as with America, we're leading the way with the whole conspiracy to enslave people in every area of their lives, mentally, emotionally, and physically. I mean, it's interesting to me to see what is so blatantly happening in terms of politics, not just in this country, but around the world. But this country at the moment is a classic example of it. We have this idea, we have to take this idea, otherwise we might realize we live in a one-party state, same with Americans and others. This idea that there are choices at elections, and then those choices are made by us to decide who the majority wants to be their government, even at its best. That is, imposition by the majority. I think there's other ways we could organize ourselves, but that's the idea. But the way the scam works, and like I say, it's so blatant in Britain at the moment, is that you have, say, two parties. We have like two and a half here, but we have two parties in most countries that have any chance of forming a government. And it works like this. The one in power, which has the power through legislation to introduce this agenda for the constant, incessant centralization of power and the destruction of freedoms in the Orwellian state, that introduces them as a government because it has the power to do so. At this time, the opposition party is opposing that agenda, largely. And then we have this farce called an election, which we did when Cameron came in. And now the party that was opposing things in opposition is now in the government. It introduces the things that it was opposing. And now the Labour Party, for all those years with Blair and Brown, was pushing this police state on and on and on. Yeah. Now it's in opposition. It's opposing it. And we've seen this extraordinarily blatant situation where Cameron and the Conservatives were talking about rolling back the Big Brother state. I remember standing in the Big Brother by-election against that guy David Davis, which was, to highlight from the Conservative point of view that we're against the Big Brother, and then they get in. And it's on steroids what's happening now in this country, and people need to reach this simple understanding that the sides in politics are merely to give us the illusion of choice. And I'm writing this book at the moment, and I'm going deeper into the rabbit hole than I ever had before. But it's in simple terms, I'm going to explain this at Wembley at length, how everything in the end comes back to the same thing. If you go back into the ancient world and you pick up the religions and what have you of places like Babylon and Sumer and Egypt and all these ancient societies, and you look at the way they structured their religion, their belief system, their use of what people call occult practices in a negative, malevolent way. And then you follow this stream of bloodline families and that belief system and that, for want of an all-encompassing term, that satanic religious network, and they move through history as one unit where one goes, the other goes. And when you get deep into the rabbit hole, you start to realize that the secret societies that are behind this manipulation and are putting people in the places to make the manipulation and the conspiracy most effective, they believe in the same entities and in the same satanic religion as the Satanists do. They just express it differently. And then when you go deeper into it, you find that behind all the cover stories of the different religions, whether it be Christian, whether it be Judaic or Hindu or Islam, whatever, you find that at its core, it's come out of this same satanic belief system. Yeah. And this same way of doing things. So in the Roman Church, you have the Eucharist, where they symbolically eat the body of Christ and drink the blood with wine. Well, that's just an outward expression of what the Satanists literally do to people. And then you find that, and O'Brien's done a lot of research on this, you find that these key people in banking, in politics, business, media, they are all initiates of this same network. And then you start to realize that if you're dealing with people in all these different expressions of our lives, our society, and they're all into sacrificing people, literally, into blood drinking rituals, into the abuse of children, into the sacrifice of children, then you can start to understand why the world is as it is and why these people and these networks have no problem crashing an economy, causing mayhem and misery, pepper bombing whole cities of civilians, and all the rest of it. It's because we're dealing with this core mentality that expresses itself through all these institutions of state and religion and everything, which is dictating the direction of our society. And while people hold on to a strand of this and think, well, yeah, I agree, all the religions are like that, but not mine. Or, yeah. All the secret societies are like that, but not mine. Oh, yeah, a lot of politicians will be like that, but not the ones I support. I'm sorry, we've got to step through step across that Rubicon and start to realize what we're dealing with. Not only will the world start to make sense, we can actually start to focus on the architects of this instead of the oil rags like the Camerons and the Browns and all the rest of it. And the Cleggs, my goodness me.
Yeah. I mean, we've recently had it's my pet hate at the moment, well, it has been for a long time, is Tony Blair, and we've recently had him hackled at the Leveson inquiry, when actually Leveson then apologises to Blair for the disruption of the inquiry. And then I think it was a week later, he was heckled yet again in Hong Kong. And his response, instead of anyone making the observation that these people who are calling for his arrest for war crimes, no one picks up on that, but Blair just ends up just laughing it off and saying, I'm used to this, and making a joke of it, that it's something to be laughed at. I mean, this is the kind of mentality, and they seem to be everywhere, these type of people at the moment.
Well, the thing is, Lou, I've been writing about this for the best part of a quarter of a century now.
Yeah.
And they are genetically different. They are. They claim to be genetically different. This is why they interbreed with each other. They are. And there's an element of their genetics that impacts massively on their psyche. And understanding this is to understand the mentality that you're describing. And that is, they do not have the ability to feel empathy. And if empathy is the fail-safe mechanism of human behavior, if you have empathy and you can put your feelings or yourself in the feelings of those who are suffering the consequences of your actions, that is a great balance, fail-safe mechanism of behavior. Imagine that you don't have that ability to feel empathy. So no matter what you do, individually or collectively to people, you have no emotional consequence whatsoever. Now, if you look at what Blair has done, Blair, he went to war with Clinton, he went to war with Bush. Now his alter ego is going to war with Obama. And when you see these people, you see, this is a really important point. What this network does, and because it's an expression of the satanic, its modus operandi is the same as the satanic. And what the Satanists do is they reverse everything. They invert everything. This is why the classic symbol of Satanism is the inverted pentagram. This is why they invert the cross. It's not a slight to Christianity. It's not, because they know the deal with Christianity is they know the deal with Judaism and all of them. It's the inversion. The cross is an ancient symbol used by these people long before Christianity. And what they've done is invert the cross. It's the inversion that's the point. So what you have to do to understand society and the way these people work is to invert everything they say and everything they do. So when they say, making a speech saying we want peace, they're actually saying we want war. When we're saying we need to sort out the global economy, they're saying actually the idea is not to. And so with this inversion, you have a situation where the greatest terrorists and mass killers on the planet, in terms of the political side of it, your George Bushes, though of course he was just a vehicle, your Tony Blairs, your Obamas and your Camerons and all these people, they are presenting themselves in version as the people of peace, the people of justice, the people who want to protect the people, when actually they have killed and maimed millions of people since 9/11. And even if 9/11 was done by Arab terrorists, terrible and horrific it was. 3,000 people in New York have led to the retribution of millions. And of course, it wasn't Arab terrorists in New York either. The same people behind that were the same people and are the same people behind this campaign of acquisition and mass slaughter. So once you start to realize what you're dealing with, it starts to make clearer and clearer sense. This is why, what do they say about Blair? What do they say about Obama? What do they say about all these people? They lie. Oh, they're lying. Look at Al Gore. They're all members of Liars Anonymous about, global warming and all that stuff. Well, yes. Of course they all lie, because they're all coming from this point of view, this modus operandi of inversion. Thus, when you do that, you must by definition be lying virtually every time you open your mouth.
What's so terrible? Brian and I we're concentrating on looking at doing a documentary on the BBC and its relationship with government and how it reports its news. And this is just now really just completely the BBC and all the mainstream media, which the masses unfortunately sit down every night at the end of their days, and they're being fed whatever lies that can be made up and what the government are telling the mainstream media to report. How do people come across, how do people like yourself and myself get across to people that what they're listening to on the black box in the corner is not the truth?
Well, all you can do is communicate that in every way you can, and people who are ready will listen, and people who are not will not. And that's something that people that do this kind of work have to come to terms with. I did a long time ago. Okay. You put it out there and keep putting it out there and keep putting it out there. That's why I'm sitting here, 12 hours a day and what have you, and traveling around. I'm putting it out. But, you would go absolutely crazy if you got attached to how it's received. The receiver has to decide that. You can only put it out there. But in terms of the BBC, and let's face it, we're having more and more success in doing that. But in terms of the BBC, I worked there for years.
Yeah.
I've worked in the BBC newsroom in London, not as a regular thing, but I worked there maybe a couple of days a week for quite a time, and it's not a newsroom. It's a place where information from official sources is filtered, or not even filtered really, although there's a form of filtering in that they turn it into their own words and then report it as news. It's just an operation of repeating the official story. See, the vast majority of journalists at the BBC, and this is the same of all these news organizations, their version of investigative journalism is reading the morning papers and watching News 24 or CNN on the newsroom television. That's it. So I was talking to someone the other night, I was doing an interview the other night, and the interviewer said to me that he'd been to, I think it was a dinner party or something, and he didn't say who it was, but he said there was quite a well-known BBC newsreader that was at the party and at the dinner, and he started talking about some of this stuff to her, and she said she thought I was crazy. Now, when you analyze that and you see how it works, journalists, ironically, that should be the people that are questioning the authorities and making sure that the authorities can substantiate their claims and their statements, they're actually among the most uninformed, programmed, P kind of perception-sized people you'll ever come across. Why? Because look at their world. Every day they go to work. They'll go to work in their car, and they'll be listening to the BBC radio, getting up to date with the news of the day. What's coming out of that radio is the official version of events turned into the words of BBC reporters and newsreaders and read as fact. They then get to the newsroom, where the newsroom telly is running. That's probably BBC 24, the 24-hour news. That's giving them the same stuff. The morning newspapers are there. That's giving them the same perspective, basically. And all through the day, news is coming in. News, information, alleged, is coming in from official sources, telling them the same thing. So when you're doing that day after day, you become completely mesmerized and programmed by the official version of everything. And that's why it's the people that are not in that world that are the real journalists today and the real investigators today, because they are not being programmed throughout their working life. And then, of course, these people will go home and they'll watch the telly and see the same programming. This is how it works. And thus, you don't really, although this does happen, of course, if things get out of hand, but you don't really have to tell these people, these journalists in that state, what to do, because they take the norm of everything as their official point of observing the world. So the scientific norm is what they'll take as credible, and anyone challenging this scientific norm must be a bit strange. The norm officially is that climate change caused by human activity is true, so they take that norm, and anyone challenging that is a bit strange. And so it goes on. And then you've got correspondents, so-called experts and reporters that are clueless overwhelmingly about the subject that they're doing. If you're a general reporter, this is the same in the whole of the media, but if you're a general reporter, you turn up and you're given a story that day, and you cover it. You don't know anything about that story when the day started, but by the lunchtime bulletin, they want something. Yeah. And by the evening, they want a bit more something. And then you go into the correspondence. I watched a guy called Ben Brown, who fronted up a lot of the coverage from Libya when civilians were pepper bombed from the sky to protect civilians. That contradiction never got through to any of these people because they're so blind, because their norm is that Gaddafi's firing and killing his own people. How do they know that? The official authorities have told them, and thus that's their point of reference. And the rebels, who were just NATO and American place people to start off the trouble, to start the excuse to go in there with NATO, they're the good guys. This is how it works. And thus, because Ben Brown knew nothing about the greater picture, all he could do was stand there every night and give you the official version of what happened that day. They have another correspondent called Fergus Walsh. He's the scientific medical correspondent. The man hasn't got a clue about medicine or science. So when you're in that situation and you're covering a medical or a scientific story, you have one point of reference for the information you're going to broadcast that day. And that is what the official authorities of medicine and science have told you. Yeah. And these people are repeaters. We do not have a journalistic profession overwhelmingly. That goes under the name of bloggers and radio stations and that are dedicated to this information. That's where the journalism is. What we have in mainstream journalism is a public relations network for the official version of everything. And then there's the other thing about journalists. The worst kind of censorship is not when someone comes along and says, that's going to be spiked, we're not having that. That's not great, but at least it's there. Yeah. And it's being, it's having to be imposed. The worst kind of censorship is self-censorship. And that's what happens in the media. I'll tell you from watching it at close range. What happens is that you get a story, and you get an angle on that story, which is seriously not the official line. Yeah. What happens then is you know that if you go in that direction, there's going to be trouble. It needs a lot more research than just taking the official line and repeating it. So you ditch it. And there was a wonderful DVD. I think it was called Outfoxed. It was a DVD. Talking to producers, former producers, and journalists on Fox News, explaining what happened every day. Every morning, the stories that news station allegedly were going to cover came down from the management. How those stories were going to be treated and the angle taken came down off the management. And anyone that deviated from that was not with Fox News very long. And so they were saying it comes to the point very quickly where you know what the game is, you know what the parameters are, and if you want to keep your job, well, you just don't go outside the parameters. Self-censorship. That's how most of it's done. Plus, through ignorance of journalists who really haven't got a clue of the world they're dealing with.
No. We
sorry.
Go on, Brian.
Okay, David. I wanted to say to you, you've come in there as always, woomph with a lot of information, which is great. I just wonder I'm going to say ordinary people who are having listened to the program, and maybe people who haven't come across you before, they will have heard stuff, I've no doubt. They will have read things about you put out by the media that you've just described. But if we came in a bit tighter and said, we've got ordinary people out there probably sitting at home, having listened to what we're talking about, we know that they are getting a sense that something isn't right in the country. They can't quite put their finger on it. They haven't yet been looking into all the high-level stuff that you've covered a little bit of right at the beginning of the program. So if we say at the moment, what is it you would say to ordinary people who are beginning to look around them saying something's not right? What areas would you point them to investigate a bit further? I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but should we be saying, just have a look at the way the police operate, or have a look at the way your local authorities operating? Can I get your opinion on some things which are close to ordinary life that aren't right at the moment?
Well, the first thing I'd say to ordinary people is stop thinking you're ordinary, because that's absolutely the key to the control. The reason the education system is as it is, the reason the media is as it is in terms of its, the Simon Cowell level of the media, which is most of it, so-called entertainment, is because the worst nightmare of a few seeking to control the many is that the many are in their power, in their understanding of the true nature of who they are, not little me, not little Ethel works down the store, and that this idea that we're little me, Joe Public, powerless, ordinary is just a massive part of the propaganda. Because once you think you're ordinary and once you think you are little me, well, you are no problem to this edifice of manipulation, because you aren't going to do anything even if you realize some of what's going on, because you're like, well, I'm powerless, what can I do? And so the first thing we need to get away from is the idea that anyone is ordinary. We are all extraordinary. It's just that some realize that and express it, and others buy the program and the propaganda that we're ordinary and powerless. That keeps us in line. It's interesting when you see a massive flock of sheep, hundreds and hundreds of them, and they are kept under control by a shepherd or two doing nothing and a sheepdog symbolizing fear. And if they stopped accepting what Hugh Edwards says on the news has to be true, stop accepting that what politicians say is about the mass manipulation into enslavement of all of us, and it's starting to dawn on people that the banks are not there for the people are there for the banks, and all the rest of it. And if we then start refusing to cooperate with our own enslavement, well, that's like the sheep herd starting to go off in all different directions. What would the shepherd do then? Nothing. They have no power. Once those sheep decide we're not following you anymore, we're not accepting your diktats anymore, and we're going off in the direction that we choose, not what you tell us, that herd of sheep is uncontrollable. The reason they're not is that they follow the one in front. I'll give you a simple example. Someone gets fined a couple of £100 or whatever it is for putting a wheelie bin out at the wrong time. Well, people go, oh, what's the world coming to? It's disgusting. And what do they do then? What time's the X Factor on, right? Well, what if, instead of moaning that hundreds and hundreds of people in the same area put the wheelie bins out at the same time every week indefinitely? I've got a quote that I made on my website. It says you can dam a stream, you can dam a river, but you can't dam a tidal wave. The power is with us, and we need to realize that by first realizing that we're not ordinary. But in terms of looking at things, okay, when there's a few and they want to control the many, there is something fundamental to doing that, and that is that power has to go into fewer and fewer hands incessantly, because the more power that is handed to the few, the more power the few have over the many. And there's another equation that goes with that. The more power you centralize, the more power there is centrally to centralize even quicker. And so we've had this process now over a very long time where humans at one point were organized in tribes, and the people in those tribes decided what happened. Then we had a fundamental epoch-changing period when lots and lots of those tribes came together as what we call nations. Now a few people at the center of the nation are dictating to all the other former tribes collectively. We're now in Europe, my goodness me, are we in Europe, massively on to the next stage, which is pulling all the nations together under a central control, the European Union. It's just the Soviet Union under another name. And so if people just looked at this simple equation, the more you centralize power, the more power the few have over everyone else. And then just look at the world in the last, well, hundreds of years, but on steroids in the last few decades and the 20th century up to now, where every area of our lives has gone through this same incessant process of centralization of power. Politically, it's blatant now. We don't even have democratic control of Europe. It's dark suits like Barroso and Rompuy. Dictators, that's what they are. We've got to the point now, would we have believed it a very short time ago? I would, but how many others who've not researched this would, where we have an unelected banker who's the leader of Italy, and his cabinet's made up of academics and bankers and non-elected people. I mean, this is the way we're going. Then look at other areas of our lives. I mean, the centralization of power got to a point long ago where it was given a name, globalization. And globalization is simply the incessant centralization of power, giving more and more power to the few. You look at media ownership, the same's happened, banking ownership, corporation ownership. It's all a very clear pattern of centralization of power. Why? Because the more you give power to the few, to the center, the more the few have over the many. So ask yourselves, I would say, why is this happening? Why has it been happening over such a long period of time? Ask why it is that every time the European Union get a reply in a referendum from people in a country, we don't want any more centralization of power that you are proposing, that there's a period where they work on turning that round, and then they have another referendum until they get the result they want. And then, if they look at referendums in Holland, in the Netherlands, and in France, which were so strongly against this European constitution that they realized that they weren't going to turn that round by the old process. So what do? They say, oh, no, it's not the constitution. It's now the treaty. We're calling it the Lisbon Treaty. Of course, 98% is the same as the constitution. And because it's a treaty, we don't have to accept the referendum because that was on the constitution. And then Blair and Cameron, oh no, we don't have to have a referendum on it now because it's a treaty, not the constitution. But every time a referendum gives them the result they want, i.e. the acceptance of more centralization of power, then there's never another referendum. So that, I would say, ask yourself, why is that? Why is there this obsession with incessant centralization of power, no matter what the public want? And I'll tell you, and I'll give you a quote from Jean Monnet, the so-called founding father of the European Union, and what became it. And this is what he wrote to a friend the day after I was born, 60 years ago, 30th of April, 1952. Europe's nations should be guided towards the superstate without their people understanding what is happening. This can be accomplished by successive steps, each disguised as having an economic purpose, but which will eventually and irreversibly lead to federation. And it's still going on. They've crashed the economies in Greece, they've crashed the euro. And what is Rumpy Pumpy and Barroso and this Gang of Four doing? They're suggesting that what's left of sovereignty in the European countries disappears to solve the problems that they have themselves created so that they could offer that solution. So if we just take a deep breath and look at the pattern, never mind the detail, and there's endless amounts of that, look at the pattern. And at the same time that this centralization of power and decision making is going on, then at the same time, more and more of the most basic freedoms are being deleted under the excuses of terrorism. And the only terrorism that I've seen for a long time has been terrorism by the very countries and the very people who are saying we must have our freedoms taken away to protect us from terrorists. Look at the patterns. The patterns are plain because the patterns are real.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, today we had, you must have been aware about Roger Hayes being put into prison today in a secret court with no representation. That he walked into the court and the judge just asked him, are you Roger of the Hayes family? And we're sentencing you to prison. No jury, no representation, just the local council and a judge throwing him into prison. I mean, this is so wrong. This is a dictatorship. Would you not say? Well,
I said a long time ago that there would come a point in this covert conspiracy, which it has been for a long, long time, where it would have to break the surface. And there's a simple reason for that. If you have been covertly manipulating towards a certain society, then there comes a point where that society has to start to manifest in the scene, in people's daily lives. Otherwise, you're not going to get what you want. And this is a point where we're at now, where what they've been covertly working towards is now breaking the surface. Now, this is a challenging thing because we don't want it to happen, but it's also a great opportunity. Because I know from my own experience, I'm sure Brian and you will from yours, that as it becomes more and more blatant, people are finding it more and more difficult to be in denial of the fact that it's happening. You know, when someone like me 20, 15 years ago said, look, this is the plan, this is what they want to bring in, it's still at that point, oh, well, it's only a theory. But there comes a point where it's not, because it's in your face. And this stuff is now being read on the television news as new government policies and stuff like that. So we are now in this point where it is becoming more blatant. And I would say to people who think, well, I'll just put my head in the sand or turn the television sound up and put my hands over my ears. If you think it's bad now, then, strap in. Because unless we head this off by using the power that we have, the many over the few, then we are going into a very, very nightmare scenario. And look your children in the eyes, look your grandchildren in the eyes, and tell them that you're going to ignore this because you'd rather it not be true, so you'll kid yourself it's not. Yeah. There was a movie came out a few months ago called Hunger Games, and it symbolized the world they want, where you had the masses, a much smaller population than now, which is part of their agenda, but you had the masses that were basically in prison camps called sectors, living in poverty, unable to have access to most of the land. And they were controlled by this high-tech beyond the lap of luxury few who were living in cities very different to the ones that the general public was. Now, you know, what Hollywood tends to do, and Hollywood, it's all about, you know, occult magic. The Hollywood, it comes from the use of the holly wand in the by the Druids and stuff like that, and it is a magical place, Hollywood, in terms of the way that it magically manipulates the perception of the world. I mean, I've traveled the world extensively, and you keep seeing these movies all the times with subtitles and what have you all over the world. It's a great place of programming, and there's a part of the programming arena called predictive programming, where they basically tell you what they're going to do. They don't tell you that, but they actually put it in front of you. And the Hunger Games was part of that, because there is something that is being worked through the United Nations called Agenda 21, which precisely wants the world that the Hunger Games portrayed, where they have, in conjunction with another operation that completely connects into it called biodiversity, they have produced a map of America that they want, where the vast majority of America is a no-go area to people, not used by them. And you know, once you start to realize these things and what the goal is, then you can start to see them walking towards the goal through this process that I call the totalitarian tiptoe, where you move from A to your goal at Z, but you don't do it in too big a leap that you'll alert people of the direction you're going. But if you research this, then it's an open book. And you know, when Cameron and the Conservative government came in and proposed to sell off all the forests, this is all part of the process of getting people off the land. It's a stepping stone towards that. In America, you've got extraordinary stories of people being forced off the land in many and various ways. You know, last year when they had the Mississippi and Missouri rivers overflow massively, there came a point where the Corps of Engineers blew the levees further upriver, because they said, oh, we've got to do it to save the people further down the river. They blew the levees and they flooded vast tracts of farmland owned by small family farms. Within 3 weeks, those farmers, those families received letters from the American government offering to buy their land through the Corps of Engineers. And that's just one example. I mean, in the parts of America where they're removing access roads from freeways to isolate areas of land and communities, to get, make it so difficult for them that they get them off the land. This is where we're going. And we can stay in denial for as long as it takes to get there, or we can have some backbone, open our eyes, and sort this out while we still can, because this is the key. They know that there are so few of these people, this inner core of the inner core network, in full knowledge of where they're going and how they're doing it. And the way that they impose their will upon the people is by recruiting from the target population for their dark suits and uniforms to run the thing for them and to impose their will upon the people. But they know that if people woke up and took action and stopped cooperating with their own enslavement and their children's and grandchildren's enslavement, the house of cards would come down, because it's only standing up with our acquiescence, our ignorance that we're doing it, but that's less and less a plausible excuse the more that this information circulates. So they know there is a colossal danger that enough people will work it out and act upon what they've worked out. And so what they're working so hard to do is to get the structure of control technologically and so many other ways in place before enough people have awoken and taken action on the back of that to bring this thing down. So it's like keep them inactive. You know what's happening. I'll give you a wonderful example of what's happening in Israel. What they've had since 1948, when Israel was officially created, was a series of fake attempts to find a peace settlement. And they're fake attempts because what's been happening is they've been buying time. Oh, we'll have a roadmap. We'll have talks about talks. But every time it gets close to any kind of agreement getting in any way close, there's always an excuse. There's some terrorist bomb goes off, which invariably has been done covertly by Mossad to kill the talks. And what's happened over these decades and decades and decades is that the Israeli government has bought enough time to go a very long way down the road to outright genocide against the Palestinian people. And they've bought the time to do it. And now they've reached the point where they have so much control and the Palestinians are in such a weak position that basically they couldn't care less what you think now. They're doing it so openly and blatantly. Now, they want to, and they are doing exactly the same thing with humanity as a whole. They are trying to get us to be inactive for as long as they can to buy the time to get all these things in place so that when people have woken up and start to respond, they're facing this edifice, not least of technological resistance. Because, you know, all this surveillance of people, all this surveillance technology, all this increasingly openly they're saying, yes, we're going to follow you on the internet, we're going to be able to read your emails and all this stuff. This is not for the mass of the population. No. This is for people who are in any way waking up, and they're preparing with it the people that are going to wake up in ever larger numbers in the next few months and years. It's for them to stop that expressing itself in bringing the house of cards down. This is why every day that we do nothing is a day lost, because of what's happening. And, you know, I see things like, even in the conspiracy research movement, I see people putting out bloody nonsense about there's going to be mass arrests and all this stuff. And what's that saying? The cavalry's coming. Oh, you don't have to do anything. Someone else is going to sort it out. Buying time to complete the job. You know, we are the ones in this situation. We are the ones that need to sort it and take responsibility for it. Because if we hadn't been looking the other way all this time, watching the latest crap from Simon Cowell, we wouldn't be this far along the road that we are.
Yeah, David, if I just... sorry, Louise, do you want to go?
No, you go, because James has just joined us now, because it's kind of getting on to sort of Liberty Tactics, which is our other show on Friday, like empowering yourself. But you carry on, Brian, and then James and I'll jump in a minute. Okay,
well, just two things. Is one, I'm listening to this extremely interested, and you know, for listeners who want to know, I can't remember when it was, but a long time ago now, when I read one of your books, David, and the thing that I paid attention to, and I'm not going to get on to the topic now because we're coming up to Louise's time and James, but. Thing that I picked up on was that you were talking about sorry,
has he gone?
He's disappeared.
He has disappeared.
The mist.
Well, David, this is James.
Hello, David.
Hello, James.
Nice to meet you.
We've got a little website, libertytactics.com, and James actually found the Rockefeller Foundation document that Patrick Henningsen actually posted it on InfoWars for us, with the 13,000 to die at the Olympics.
Right.
That was predicted. So James found that article and rewrote it. He found the paperwork and rewrote it. And we've set up a little website, and we've got this Friday show on critical mass, haven't we?
Yeah.
And it's kind of about people starting to self-empower themselves, preparedness, and... on last Friday, David, I had a phone call from the whistleblower who went on to Tony Gosling's show.
Yeah, I saw your interview with him.
Yeah, so we had him on the show last week, and then I had him back on the show, and Patrick Henningsen from InfoWars, who came over recently and spoke to you.
Right.
We did another show with him. Now, it's quite funny because James and I have been talking a lot about the Olympics. Is it all set up for something to happen? And I was just really, your thoughts on the Olympics, to begin the first subject, is your thoughts on the Olympic Games, and do you think something's going to happen?
Oh dear. Well, I mean, I could talk for ages. It depends how deeply you want to go. But let's go deep.
Okay then.
What these people do, for reasons I explain in my books, they feed off human energy and they manipulate the Earth's energy field because, we see our body. It appears to be solid. It appears to be physical. It's not. There's no such thing as the physical. I mean, quantum physics will tell you that. It's a hologram. It's illusory physical. And there are many levels to the human form, and one of them is an electromagnetic field that we call the human aura. And at the level of the electromagnetic, we can connect into the electromagnetic field of animals, of plants, of anything. And we certainly interact on that level with the electromagnetic field of the Earth. So we're in. If you kind of symbolize the Earth's magnetic field as the wireless internet, and the human form is like a computer that connects into that wireless internet, there is an interaction between the two. When you go into a house or a building where there's been a lot of really negative things, you go, oh my goodness, it's horrible in here. Well, what's making you do that? You're picking up the distortions and imbalances in the electromagnetic field. And then you go to another place and you feel really high and joyous because you are actually connecting into a balanced electromagnetic field and thus having a good experience. So where I'm going with this is that you can manipulate the population individually and collectively by accessing the electromagnetic field and of the people, and you can also trawl their energy, particularly if you can gather them together in large numbers. And another thing, and this, I know a lot of people listening to this will find this hard to take if they are new to it, but everything has an electromagnetic field. A flame has an electromagnetic field. A symbol has an electromagnetic field. A deity in a church has an electromagnetic field. Everything does. It's all energy in the end. And thus, we can be manipulated on that level by other electromagnetic fields. This network of bloodlines and secret societies, they don't have a whole language of symbolism like the all-seeing eye that you see on the dollar bill, like the pyramid and the flame and the six-pointed star, which is symbolic of Saturn. They don't have all these things for fun. They have them because they know they can have an impact. The Satanists don't work with the inverted pentagram because it's a laugh. They know that it has a energetic impact. That's why they've used these same symbols throughout thousands of years. When insiders have been involved in some of these rituals around the world with leading politicians who've told me how they do Babylonian rituals and they do Druidic rituals. They don't follow those rituals because of just tradition. They followed those rituals because they worked it out a long time ago. The way to conduct the ritual, the colors, which are vibrations and electromagnetic fields themselves, and the words, which are vibrations from the vocal cords, etc., what the combination is needed to do to have the effect that you want. That's why they just keep repeating the same rituals generation after generation. And that you can have a satanic ritual. When they had these ancient open sacrifices to the gods, they used to say, they were sacrificing someone to the gods. Well, what were they sacrificing? They were sacrificing the energy field, the electromagnetic energy field, because the more terrified you become, the more in extreme fear you become, that has an effect on your electromagnetic field. It takes it into a certain frequency band, which can then be trawled. And you can do this individually, and it's widely documented how that's happened over the years and still is, or you can do it collectively. Because, when you go to a football match and the crowd is really excited. People say, the atmosphere was unbelievable. The hairs on the back of my neck were standing up. Well, what is atmosphere? It is the energy of excitement electromagnetically generated by the sum total of the crowd. That's why the hairs stand up on your back of your neck. It's an electromagnetic field. And they set up these mass rituals all the time in religions, and not least in this country through the royal family, where they trawl the energy of the people. And so if you, there's this great line, energy flows where attention goes. I was talking on the Alex Jones show the other day, and he was saying how he's experienced feeling someone was looking at him, behind him, in a restaurant maybe, and he's turned round and he's seen this person looking at him. Well, what has he been feeling? He's been feeling the energetic connection that is made when you focus. So the person is focusing on him, and what people would say, he's looking at me intensely. But that focus on an electromagnetic level generates a connection, and that's what you feel when you feel, I just feel someone's looking at me, and you turn around and they are. And this connection can be made by getting anyone to focus on something. And if you can get them to focus on the symbols, whether they're people or whether they are symbols in churches or what have you, of this network, you focus their attention, you make that energetic connection, and you control their energy through it. Because this world is being manipulated not primarily from the world that we see, but from frequency bands beyond it, where this energy is trawled from humanity in general. So when you look at this summer, because you can never take one thing in isolation, it's always a sequence. We've had mass ritual after mass ritual this summer in Britain. With the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, and the focus upon the Queen, who is an absolute personification of this network. And if she represents it, then the focus of attention upon her will make that energetic connection in a way that the energy can be trawled by this network and that which is beyond the world that we can see. So you look at the river pageant and the bells leading it. That's all part of the vibrational ritual, and all the churches ringing their bells in unison as the bell barge went along. What's going to be one of the great centerpieces of the opening ceremony of the Olympics? A massive, enormous, staggeringly big bell. And of course, they've been using bells in their energetic rituals for thousands of years. They just put it on public display in a way that it kind of tries to hide it. It's just part of pomp and ceremony. What we call pomp and ceremony is actually ritual, satanic ritual in your face. The two key colors in satanic ritual are red and black. Look at any royal occasion. Look at the royal wedding. Look at the barge. Look at anything. It's all black and red. This is because it's a public ritual. And one of the great symbols for thousands of years of this network has been the torch and the flame. And one of the central points of this Diamond Jubilee was at the time of the music concert outside Buckingham Palace, where 4,200 beacons, i.e. flames, fires, were lit all over Britain and all over the Commonwealth, leading to the ritual at the end of the concert of the Queen using a crystal diamond to activate the mechanism that made that flame explode into life outside Buckingham Palace. This is all happening on a subconscious electromagnetic level, and that focus with the symbols of these people makes an energetic connection to these people. At the same time, we've had the flame, again the flame and the torch coming from Greece and going all around the country in virtually every populated area. That's all been going on at the same time, and it's bringing that energy, that collective energy, into London for the big opening ceremony, which will be full of bloody symbolism. With the moment when the flame is lit in the cauldron, of course, used in these rituals for thousands of years, and then you look at what Britain is and what London is. You know, I talk about the Earth having this electromagnetic field. Well, you know, we know that. But also within this field is a network of force lines, energy lines, which are known as ley lines or meridian lines or whatever. We have them in the body. That's what acupuncture is working with its needles, the flow of energy through these meridian lines. And the energy lines in the body are carrying information, what the Chinese call qi. Energy and information are the same thing. So passing through this network of force lines, ley lines, meridians, or in and through the planet is information. And there are points where these lines cross. If two cross, a small vortex is thrown up. If a lot of lines cross, there is an enormous vortex. And what you do in these big vortexes, what you impregnate it with in terms of information, in terms of energy, then gets transmitted all around the planet to impregnate itself within the energy field of the planet in general. It just so happens that the British Isles in general, and in many ways London in particular, is one of these great central points on the Earth's magnetic grid. This is why there are more standing stone circles and earthworks in Britain per square mile than anywhere else in the world. And what they're doing is they're focusing this energy upon London. This is where the flame is coming to finish up for the Olympics. Now, as I said, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but all the signs are that something is building here big time. We'll have to see how it works out. But I just said that what you do in these major vortex points is impregnates itself upon the entire Earth's magnetic field. So, having focused this energy, this electromagnetic energy upon London through this summer of ritual, should they, in that vortex, during or after the Olympics, have a massive negative event, then its impact, not just upon the Earth's field, but on the global psyche of humanity, will be absolutely enormous. You know, there are organizations that have measuring devices at different points around the world, which are measuring changes in the Earth's magnetic field. At the time of 9/11, as the information started to circulate of what had happened, and people were doing what? Focusing on an incredibly negative event all over the world on the television. At that point, there were massive spikes in the electromagnetic field. And because we are interacting with it all the time, what they do to us in terms of manipulating our mental and emotional state impacts upon the field, and what they do to the field impacts upon us. And this is the level it's all going on. And this is the level that this whole summer of ritual is going on. And it is very possible, not saying it's going to happen, but it is very possible that they will try to do something before the summer is out that will impact in the way that I'm talking about.
Yeah, there seems to be, if you look into, you have the age of Aquarius coming up, which is always put forward as a very positive thing, but before that positivity, Aquarius dumps the old water away. You've also got the Saturn worship with the time cube ending in red, which is where we are now. So from their standpoint, it's probably quite a positive to start moving things forward so that they can start getting rid of this old system and either re-loop it into, you know, resetting the matrix, as it were, or it just feels like they're ready for sort of the opposite of the awakening of mankind, which maybe would be the natural sort of thing, and they want to reset it on their terms. Am I making sense there?
You're making absolute sense,
that's what it feels like.
I completely agree with you. You know, I've been saying this for quite a few years now. Look at these two things happening at the same time. 22 years ago, when I started to realize what was happening, when the top of my head blew off, and my life changed, there was no sign of this great awakening. But I was told various ways that it was coming, and I gave it the name, The Truth Vibrations, which was the name of the first book I wrote on these subjects 22 years ago. And if you look at it now, it blatantly is happening. I mean, I've kind of been a barometer of it. I mean, I've been on this path now for 22 years. I've seen the awakening, and I travel intensely around the world. I've seen it's a global phenomenon. But at the very same time this is happening, we are having this on steroids Orwellian state being imposed upon us. And you know, it's been my perception for quite a time now that actually what we're seeing in so many ways, not maybe entirely, but to a very large extent, this Orwellian state that we're seeing, this surveillance, this control system that's emerging by the day, is actually a defense mechanism. It's trying to head off this awakening as best it can. Now, what happens when you awaken is that you open your mind and you let consciousness in beyond the mind body. And to do that, to open your mind, you have to get out of density. You have to get into some kind of balance so that you can connect with higher levels of your own awareness beyond this manipulated world that we call the matrix. Now, if you want to stop that happening, then you need to imbalance people. You need to imbalance them mentally and emotionally. There's an organization in America called the Institute of Heart Math who have done some brilliant research on the nature of the heart in its electromagnetic sense. Again, they found that the heart vortex in the center of the chest, what they call in the East the heart chakra, the wheel of light, or a lot of the people in the New Age talk about this too. And it's, first of all, the most powerful electromagnetic field in the body. They've also found that there's more nerves going from the heart to the brain than going the other way. And all the evidence and all the experience, really, of daily life is that the true innate intelligence is in the heart. When we talk about feeling intuition, we don't put our hands to our head. We put our hands to our heart. I just feel it. Because, and we are, in body language, going to the point where that feeling's coming from.
I think there was even a study that showed that there was some sort of precognition with the heart, and that the heart knew something was happening before it happened and before the mind could react to it. It was sort of like...
Really?
This was, I think it was in the Living Matrix, which I believe you were in. And
yeah, well, that's
studies going into that, and
that's absolutely right, because innate intelligence, intuitive knowing, is far more conscious and aware than the brain or the mind, which has to work it out. So when we're thinking, which is a very low level of activity, consciousness activity, we have to work it out. But with the heart, with intuition, we instinctively know. Now, what they've found in their research is that if the heart, in terms of its electromagnetic field, is in what they call a coherent state, in other words, a balanced state, and connects with the electromagnetic field of the brain and the central nervous system, that trinity of connection takes the person into a very much greater expanded state of awareness. And the key to holding that awareness is the coherence of the heart's magnetic field. Now, so in the core of this conspiracy, this is why, I go into this stuff so much, and I will at Wembley in October, is because this is where this core that's driving this conspiracy in the shadows, this is the level on which it's working. And so it targets the heart. It targets it with fear. And what it wants to do, and it has done brilliantly, is to take the point at which we interact with the world from the heart to the gut, to the belly, to the vortex or chakra that is the one for emotion. This is why we feel butterflies when we are nervous in the belly. This is why we often need the toilet if we're very, very nervous. It's because the imbalance by the nerves and the fear of this belly chakra vortex impacts upon the holographic field and creates those consequences. And what they have created is a belly-based society instead of a heart-based society, overwhelmingly. And so often, instead of me hearing people say, "What does your heart tell you?" I hear, "What does your gut tell you?" It's very kind of symbolic of where we're interacting with the world. And where are we interacting with it? Where do we make our decisions from overwhelmingly? Where do our reactions come to experiences and events? They come from the belly. They come from an emotional perspective. This is all manipulated to take us out of our innate intelligence. But as people move into a state of greater awakening, they move more into the heart. And this network at the core of all this understands these processes. And it knows that if it's going to throw a spanner in the works of this awakening, it has to throw a spanner in our energetic balance and coherence. And so what it's doing is throwing at us economic catastrophe, war. It's putting things in the food and the drink and the water, which affect us hormonally and chemically, which impact upon the energetic balance of the body, and they are trying as much as possible to destabilize us, to stop us taking full advantage of this vibrational change that's going on, which is impacting upon people's perception so more and more obviously. It's an energetic conspiracy which manifests out as what appears to be a physical conspiracy. There was I did an article at the weekend about a document called Quiet Weapons for Quiet Wars, which I first saw very soon after I started to wake up 22 years ago. And it came to light in, 1989, I think it was. And it was 1986, and it was dated 1979. And it was a manual for people who've been recruited into the government, military, mass mind control, mass perception manipulation programs, to show them and tell them how it's done. And it goes into how the whole thing about human control, as I've been saying for years and years and years, is actually about perception control, perception manipulation. If there's a few in you and you want to control the many, you ain't going to do it physically. You can do it in small areas with tanks in the streets, but You can't do it to 7 billion people. You have to do it by controlling their perception so that they see themselves in the world and behave, therefore, in ways that suit your conspiracy. But where I'm going with this in terms of this energy is it goes in some considerable detail into the nature of the economic system. And it says that actually it was understood a long time ago, and the Rothschilds were very much involved in this, it said, that the economic system responded very much and acted very much like an electrical energetic system. And so what they've done is create an energetic construct called the financial system to control the flows of power, information, electricity, which makes sure that the flow of power, here we go again, what I've been talking about, trawling the power of the people, the power ends up with them. So we see it in the holographic world, what we call physical, as all the money ending up with a few people. But actually, if you could see it on an energetic level, beyond human sight, it's actually like rivers of information, rivers of electromagnetic force, which are constructed to do that. And this is where what we need to understand if we're going to understand the conspiracy, because if we only look at the physical level of it, then we're going to see in effect, not even symbolically, in effect, we're going to see the movie hitting the screen as a done deal. That's what's happening when we see it happen in the world of the conscious mind. We've got to understand where it's coming from and thus where we can change it. And it's on this energetic level. And when you understand that, these royal rituals and Olympic rituals start to take on a totally different perspective to what they appear to be if you don't realize that this energetic level is happening. And this is the core level of the whole conspiracy. So what they're doing now is trying to get us in such a state of fear, a state of worry about the future in terms of the way the world's going, in terms of money and the financial system, loss of jobs and homes and livelihoods. So we so concentrate on that survival, and that concentration on survival has a distorted impact upon our energy field, because naturally we shouldn't be here to survive but to express that they are seeking to destabilize us energetically, emotionally, and mentally, so that they can head off the greatest impact potentially of this time of awakening.
Yeah. And we've had today. Go on.
Well, I was just going to say, I just wanted to quickly touch on talking about we've got all this news going on about the God particle. One article that struck me this morning was that scientists have come up with a way that they believe that they'll be able to detect dark matter, which is, of course, the theoretical substance that is basically keeping all of our atoms together. And they say that it would be constructed using gold and DNA, and it just sort of struck me, gold as being a central focus for the power elite for all of history, that we can go back. If the Phoenicians, everybody, they're obsessed with it. And maybe, do you think there is any sort of correlation with their ability to control all of the things outside of the holographic world that they would use gold for? Or is it simply just a tool of like money?
Well, it's both, really. I mean, they've convinced people it has value, and therefore people give it value, just as they've convinced people that the £10 note in your pocket is worth £10 when it's a piece of paper and actually is an IOU. Yeah. It's a promise to pay the bearer. It's not actually the payment. I mean, the whole financial system's a confidence trick and a magical trick. But there's no question that when you look through history, as you rightly say, about the obsession with gold, and this is always significant, I promise you, the obsession that the Rothschilds have had with gold. I mean, for such a long time, right through to I think something like 2004, the price of gold was set every day, twice a day, in the offices of N.M. Rothschild in the city of London, and then suddenly they pulled out of it, and it's if you go back to the Sumerian tablets where they talk about some non-human race called the Anunnaki coming to the Earth and manipulating human genetics and all that stuff. Well, again, it connected this Anunnaki to a desire for mining vast amounts of gold. So there's something in this, and it's my view, having looked at this and picked up bits of information here and there over the years, that most of the gold that officially exists isn't there. When people like the president of Venezuela suddenly demand that all their gold, all the Venezuelan gold, Chavez, is physically, not in paper, physically returned to Venezuela, then at the very same time that the stories are circulating that gold ingots have been drilled into and found to be tungsten bars covered with only a small amount of gold, because tungsten actually has very much the feel and weight of gold, and that's why they use tungsten. And then you've got someone in Ron Paul, the congressman in America, who picked up this whole theme of there's no gold in Fort Knox. And he asked Fort Knox if he could go in and see the gold. This was last year. And they said no. And he found out that no politician had been allowed into Fort Knox since 1974. Yeah. Then one of the television stations, the mainstream television stations, asked if they could go in and take stock footage of the gold, because no stock footage had been taken since, again, 1974, and they were refused. And there's something very, very significant about this gold, and I do strongly feel that most of it's not there. I mean, there was another story where a guy who officially owns gold asked, I think it was a Swiss bank, to produce it so he could see it, and all hell broke loose trying to find it. Of course, it does.
Of course, Gaddafi had possession of quite a lot of physical gold, which conveniently disappeared. So it does seem that the worth of gold that we're seeing and the worth of gold to the power elite is quite a bit different, because it seems to vanish.
Yeah.
Yes, and in the end, it has to come down to something, because this is where it always comes down to with these people. It has to come down to something to do with its vibrational frequency and the impact it has upon energy, the impact it has on consciousness. It always does.
I know you want to go and get your dinner, but I just a very touch on this Saturn worship, if you don't mind. James has got me totally hooked on it, to do with the black cube, and you've got the cube that they pray to in Mecca. In the United Nations meditation room, there is a big black cube that is sitting there. What are your thoughts on all this? That the power elite is actually Saturn that they are worshipping.
Well, I've written extensively about it.
Yeah.
My last book, Remember Who You Are,
Yes.
Was very much centered on this, and the book I'm writing at the moment is massively centered on this in a much more expanded way, because of course you learn more all the time.
Yeah.
And it's my view that this matrix is actually being generated from Saturn. That's what the rings are.
Yeah.
And I've been reading about and watching a video of, actually, a man who's quite elderly now, called Berggren, who was an insider in America in these space projects and what have you, who says that he's written books about it. He's seen craft which seem to take an electromagnetic form, which are spinning around the rings of Saturn and building them. Something's coming out of them, which is manifesting as the rings of Saturn. Because when you look at the ancient accounts of Saturn, which seems to have been much closer to the Earth at one point, it's a big story. Velikovsky and all these people that talk about great cataclysmic changes in the solar system, I think, are absolutely right. So Saturn was much more focused on in the ancient world. I never had rings. Well, it's got rings now, obviously, and I say that that's a form of broadcasting system, which actually we're picking up. For me, I go into this in detail in the books, and I will at Wembley. All this new stuff I'm going to do at Wembley. The genetic manipulation of humanity, which is talked about by all the ancient societies, was to tune human DNA, which is a receiver transmission system, into this matrix frequency. And so we're picking up this fake reality. And this band of this matrix operates in the frequency band of what I call body-mind. That's the human body and the lower auric field. And if you are only perceiving, if your point of attention is only in that level of perception, then you're in the matrix and you're of the matrix. But when you start to open your mind and expand into a greater consciousness beyond that, you go beyond the matrix. And at that point, you start to see things because you've got a much more expanded point of attention. So you're in this world, yes, and you're interacting with it and you're seeing everything everyone else does, but you're seeing it from another perspective because you are looking at it from a higher level of awareness that is beyond the matrix. You're looking in to a certain extent, not just being in and therefore being confused by where am I, what's going on. And, I saw over the years this intense obsession, you're right, with Saturn symbolism. People like Jordan Maxwell in America have talked extensively about all this. My question, however, was why? What's the next stage of, yes, we can see, why? What is the obsession with Saturn? Because you look at the religions, you'll see Saturn symbolism all over them. Yep. You go to the secret societies like the Freemasons, Saturn symbolism all over them. You go into Satanism, Saturn symbolism. You go into the flag of Israel, for instance, and the very name Rothschild. Rothschild comes from the German Red Shield, and the Red Shield referred to a red six-pointed star on the Rothschild's house in Frankfurt. And the red Saturn, Satanism, six-pointed star, is the symbol of Saturn. Not just the red one, that's a more extreme version, but the six-pointed star is a symbol of Saturn. So the very name Rothschild, Red Shield, comes from a symbol of Saturn. And when the Rothschilds then moved their operation, not for the benefit of Jewish people, for the benefit of their agenda, into Israel, they put the six-pointed star on the flag of Israel. And then you look at the Pope. I was looking at a picture of him today. I mean, I try not to, but sometimes I have to in the name of research. And he's got this big mitre on, which is just a fish head hat, which the old fish god worshipping priests in Mesopotamia used to wear. And the Archbishop of Canterbury wears it as well. But on the side of this mitre is a six-pointed star, blatantly. You look at the so-called seal of Saturn, esoterically, which goes back into the ancient world, and it is the compass of Freemasonry. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and then you've got the cube you talk about, which I've talked about in the last book, and that's another thing. When they go to Mecca in their millions, and they go to the Kaaba, which this cube, Kaaba means cube, and they go on their Hajj, their ritual, and they're told when they get there that they must pray around the Kaaba in concentric circles. It's hilarious when you see a picture because it's the rings of Saturn you're looking at with the Kaaba in the middle. And then they have to walk 7 times around the Kaaba. And in Hinduism, they walk the other way around their temples. Mm-hmm. And when millions of people are walking in unison around that Kaaba, that focus of satanic, saturnic energy, they create a massive electromagnetic motor. As the magnetic fields of the people walk through, interact, and fire up the magnetic field of the mosque in Mecca. This is where it's happening all the time, and Saturn is absolutely at the heart of it. Saturn is it's actually a sun, but they call it a planet. It's the sun planet of the courts, of authority, of banking, of government, of science.
Well, a legal system brought to us, the maritime legal system brought to us by the Phoenicians, which were Saturn worshippers. It seems, and the Phoenicians were a high priest class that, it seems that a lot of the mystery school religions come from them. So it does all seem like it's completely all the major religions, all the spiritual meccas, they've all got these people that are pushing this Saturn worship through the religion, so that it does seem to
you
be
went to James went off. I couldn't make it, unfortunately. James went off to Stonehenge and had a massive shock when he saw this giant,
like a Nephilim. I think it's supposed to be some Aztec priest,
but it was lit up in purple.
It was lit up in purple, which is the color of the Phoenicians, and he had the sign of Saturn on his neck, and cubes and purple lights everywhere, and I was just like, hell, But yeah, it does. When your eyes are awake to certain symbolism, it does seem to be that they're obsessing about it. I mean, even going from, I think, September 9th, footage from the Twin Towers, they were flying the Saturn blimp around around the Twin Towers, and it's something that you wouldn't click in until you realise just how big Saturn is.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, like if that was all sort of staged, that... Because it is all manipulation of this matrix that we're in, it seems.
Honestly, mate, everything these people do is ritual. Everything. I mean, this is why you've got the royal family go to the same palaces at the same time every year. It's all ritual. You look at the Jewish religion. I mean, I don't think they can go 5 minutes without having to do something that the law tells them they've got to do. It's all, their whole lives are ritual. You look at the Christian religion, ritual. Islamic religion, ritual. I mean, 5 times a day, is it? All those Muslims all over the world kneel and face Mecca. What are they doing? They're making an energetic connection to the Kaaba. Yeah. I mean, it's so obvious. So when I spoke earlier, when we were doing the interview with Brian Gerrish, and I was talking about how Satanism and secret societies and religion and politics are all aspects of the same thing. Well, Saturn worship is that same thing, and that which goes with it.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's been just
great,
amazing. Yeah. I'm buzzing. Thank you so much, David. And I can't wait till October. And we're always here if you ever want to come on and have a chat.
Okay, Lou. Yeah, I mean, I to be honest, I know people say this, but I can't wait till October either, and the Wembley Arena, because, not only will I put a massive amount of new information and bring this down to the simplest I've done so far, because you start to learn what's interesting but actually is not totally relevant, and you keep to what's totally relevant, and suddenly this crystal clarity picture comes. But it's also about getting a large, as many people as possible together with open hearts and open minds, and that energy field that can be generated there in London at the end of all this nonsense that we've had of the other kind by then, can make a massive impact. Because if they can put negative, distorting frequencies into the energy field, then we can do the opposite in the same area and negate what they've done, and even more than negate it. One of the things that they found at this Institute of Heart Math is feelings of love in its true sense. Feelings of love, appreciation, caring, and all this stuff are thousands and thousands and thousands of times more powerful than hatred and aggression and all these other things. We have the power, and because they know that, they've pulled us into the belly, so we're out of that power, and we want to come back into it at Wembley, big time together.
Yeah. Have you got anything planned before Wembley? Are you going abroad again and doing tours? Just concentrating on the book? I
did 45,000 miles about that in the air last year, all over the world, about 1.5 times round. I mean, I you could have poured me into a jar at the end of the year, and. But I wanted to leave the talking to Wembley this year and write a book. And also, I've been talking all over the world for all these years, but I'm going to start with a blank sheet of paper for the Wembley event and put together a whole new presentation from scratch. So that's going to take me at least a month, maybe a couple of months, so to do it properly, because there's so many images, and you have to inwardly digest, as my teacher used to say. Ike, inwardly digest the information relating to the picture, and it takes a lot of time. So that's the rest of my year. But I think I'll be back. I'll be back going through not going through them, but going past the body scanners in 2013 quite a lot, I think.
Fantastic.
Right.
David, thank you so much for sparing your valuable time to talk on our little show. It's great.
Thanks
It's
a lot,
been a
David.
real pleasure. Honestly, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks very much.